everybody, welcome to Illuminated Productions. It's October and that means it's time to jump into some horror reviews. We just got done with the 50s and 60s and that was pretty frightening for me. The 70s is a whole different animal though, with the rise of exploitation movies and an extra dose of on-screen violence. Let's jump right into the countdown. I'm Sam and here's my top 10 list. Jaws. Although you may be surprised this isn't a little higher on the list, I actually picked this one based on its rewatchability factor and overall scope. I love these characters and their dialogue. Spielberg's use of cross motion is spot on as usual, and of course the rare glimpses of the iconic monster are panic-inducing. I think my favorite part may be down below though, with the three leads talking about their past and connecting on a human level through the power of story. No cutaways either, just sheer ingenuity and talent on display. It's that humanity that makes us feel what the characters are feeling. And I get into this somewhat often, but it's because it really is so important in making any successful film. A total smash hit in every sense of the word, this beast is a blockbuster classic I can't help include. Valerie and her Week of Wonders. Oh boy, you better buckle up for this one. A surrealist fantasy-like horror based on the novel with the same name, we follow young Valerie attempting to make sense of her heirloom earrings holding a devious relationship with a horrifying constable. The film is full of pivot-like turns that are really unsettling in basic idea and in execution. It has been claimed as, quote, vibrant and, quote, enigmatic, and has a tone that I find remarkably eerie and unnerving in all of its bold fright. Themes of rape, violence, and vampires. Valerie and her Week of Wonders is a Czech film that is not really for the faint of heart. One may find the plot here to be somewhat impalpable, but the rich, memorable visuals and the awe-inspired soundtrack make up for the slack. Carrie. I don't find Carrie so terrifying in that typical sense either. There's some horror-inducing shots of Carrie's mother and of Jesus in various statue-like form, but the reason I chose the Stephen King adaptation is due to the character work and for Sissy Spacek's electrifying performance as the telekinetic outsider. She dazzles in this role and we feel her pain and empathize with her many put-upon frustrations by her peers, mother, and even her principal. Carrie does make some genuine connections throughout the picture and that's nice, but what's nice turns into quite the opposite. During the scene's classic climax, a somewhat large tonal shift is made, and in my opinion is a little short-lived here, but it's Brian De Palma's overall direction combined with the cinematography and performances by Sissy Spacek, Piper Laurie, and John Travolta that really helped Carrie make the cut here. The Academy gave nominations to Laurie, Carrie's mother, and of course Spacek in the titular role. The film was met with instant rave reviews and has held down its monumental status throughout the years, though some criticize its ending for being, quote, clumsy and, quote, falling apart. While I don't entirely disagree, I find the last few minutes of the movie pretty frightening though, and I want to urge viewers now to avoid the remakes and sequel at all costs. This is Carrie 1976. This was actually one of King's first successful buyouts as an author, sent to the publisher by his wife. It was something he didn't think much of at the time. The Wicker Man. There are few words to describe this nightmare-inducing British cult film. The overall bizarre tonal shifts and physical action from some of the side characters are disarming to say the least. Built around the notion of a missing Christian girl, a bleak sense of disconnect is constantly clouding the detecting protagonist as a plot against the unwelcome tourist on an offshore island is induced. Please, and I'm sure you already know, but be warned of the Nicolas Cage remake. It should only be watched as an unintentional comedy. This twisted black sheep is the opposite of that. This one really is weird and oddly convincing given its peculiar subject material. The director of the original Wicker Man disputed the remake to great extents, later making his own spiritual sequel, which I have not seen and don't really plan to based on what I've heard. The Wicker Man is honestly effective and deranged though. Midsommar takes some clear inspiration from this original classic. Several cuts exist, as the studio involvement proved unfavorable to director Robin Hardy. This one feels a bit dated regarding some of the music, although I do enjoy the Celtic folk bits. And it's hard to resist Christopher Lee running amok in various jester-like costumes. This one was also controversial for its sexual content and religious involvement. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Produced, directed, co-scored, and co-wrote by Tobe Hooper, who later made Poltergeist, there are a few elements here that cement this indie film in its slot. The grainy film and dingy setting amplify the nauseating, macabre elements of inbred cannibalism in Texas. Made with unknown actors and a micro-budget, the fact that the moment where Leatherface is introduced in such an incredible way is truly an impressive display of blood, sweat, and tears. This is another pretty messed up movie in its own way, but maybe somewhat tame for today's audience. It still makes me squirm. The grandpa? Whew. Receiving mixed reviews back then, critics were turned off by its ugliness and sadistic nature, which is of course the very thing that makes it hold up so great today. Stephen King praised the film for its quote cataclysmic terror. Roger Ebert gave some positivity based on its ambitions, exploration, and technical execution. Others were wowed by the performance of Sally, played notoriously without breaks by Marilyn Burns. Be warned of some dated bits, the 70s specifically does not age so well in all areas. This animal had a massive financial turnover and led on to many sequels, prequels, and spin-offs throughout the years, no one reaching any level of critical success that this rabid underdog produced. Alien. What really sells this film to me is the iconic use of atmosphere and its classic use of suspense. A true slow burn helmed by director Ridley Scott, with tuned performances by Sigourney Weaver, John Hurt, and Ian Holm. Alien puts the horror in space, and is sealed proof that menacing extraterrestrials will forever be terrifying. Available in restored 4K, the film's visual aesthetic holds up remarkably well in most areas and serves as some sort of time portal to 1979's vision of the future, not unlike A Clockwork Orange. Executed with confident, assured direction and constantly stunning cinematography, Alien is another go-to classic that I can't help include. Winner of Best Visual Effects by the Academy, the sci-fi thriller spawned several sequels, prequels, and spin-offs. The 70s really had some fresh originality happening in cinema and is said to be one of the best decades for film. With an ultra-simple plot and playing off of audience expectations, we are sent on a gritty yet sleek ride into hell with the iconic character Ripley, played by Weaver. With intensely scaled set pieces and an offbeat editing pace of other thrillers, this iconic creature feature includes some of the most original design work accounted for. Alien was met with some mixed reviews upon release, but has clearly made a long leap since. Don't Look Now. Based on a short story, Don't Look Now is a unique kind of supernatural and psychological hybrid that has one of the scariest and most disturbing unveilings I've ever experienced. Don't Look Now knows when to take its time and has a dreamlike approach in its storytelling, evident in the directing, editing, and acting. Donald Sutherland stars as a father and husband who loses his daughter in the beginning of the film in a horrific drowning sequence. We grieve in great disarray with the mother, played by Julie Christie, as the film takes us on a hypnotic and harrowing venture into deep mystery and curiosity with a stunning twist ending that has a long aftertaste. This piece is a tad dated in some areas, i.e. the somewhat wonky soundtrack, and has a tendency to appear as dragging, but the psychic trip is well worth the runtime with fantastic uses of image overlay, cross-dissolves, and nonlinear editing. There is an obvious use of the color red exploring questions of symbolism and some riveting cinematography at play in which the British Academy awarded it that year. Set in a perfectly disconnected maze-like Venice with a background of a loose serial killer entangled, this misleading, meandering tone of the film is saved by the all-answering, shocking ending. The film was controversial upon release for having an unusually graphic sex scene, but is mostly just kind of funny and awkward to watch now. Films like The Shining and The Wicker Man are said to be greatly inspired by this remarkable oddity. The Tenant. Renowned and controversial director Roman Polanski did a series of apartment films from the 1960s to the 70s, concluding his nauseating trio with The Tenant, an ambitious France-based psychological story about a naive outsider seeking room and board in an unfriendly village in which our protagonist believes his neighbors and landlord are plotting against him, leading towards his total unhinging and a fairly bizarre ending. There are some chilling themes and ideas throughout the film, in which will leave you asking questions about the meaning, and I admit I didn't fully understand the film at first, but I didn't have to in order to enjoy its haunting techniques that felt personal to director Polanski, who also stars in the picture. There are many themes and diagnoses of the film, including one of Kafkaesque beliefs. The Tenant was critically bashed upon arrival. Roger Ebert called it, quote, not merely bad and embarrassment, but has since proven to acquire critical hail and splendor. Its themes of isolation, circles, and loss of identity ring richly relevant today and has some genuinely bone-chilling moments. Don't expect all of your questions to be answered at the ending in a neat package either, as this one takes some serious reanalyzing, if not numerous viewings, to be fully appreciated. The Exorcist. I remember exactly where I was when I first saw the spider walk on a televised cut of The Exorcist, and I'll never forget that. This was one of my earliest experiences with R-rated horror films, adapted from William Peter Blatty's novel. This one haunts and builds to its controversial scenes and climax. Teenage daughter Regan, played with utter impressive range by Linda Blair, and her mother, played with harrowing feat by a then lesser-known Ellen Burstyn, build a relationship early on as we are rooted deeply within these characters. I really admire their relationship in the beginning, which was of course the exact intention for filmmaker William Friedkin, who wanted to make the shocking events to come that much more impacting. The film caused walkouts, vomiting, and fainting at the time of theatrical release, and is now another go-to pick for not only 70s horror, but horror in general. Some cities even tried to ban audiences from seeing it, but it ended up being the highest grossing R-rated horror film of all time, only having recently been defeated by It. I have to admit, I do find a few bits slightly dated, but the visions of the demon and the film's execution of a simple, effective premise was so successful that it was the first horror film to be nominated for Best Picture by the Academy. There is also a long history of the production of the film involving the house burning down and the actors having to go under medical evaluation several times. There are a few versions of the film. One director's cut includes the infamous spider walk scene, which was cut without permission from Blatty by Friedkin last minute, who later admitted to making the wrong move. There's also some alleged symbolism behind the flashing of the demon face, along with some other sexual-related insinuations, later both denied by Blatty and Friedkin.
Michael?
You poor pathetic bastard!
Then I noticed, in all my pain and sickness, what music it was that, like, cracked and boomed. It was Ludwig van.
John, well, just hold it. You ain't
Jesus.
going no damn where.
This is ridiculous. Excuse me.
Howard, I blow your dust out all over these woods.
Eraserhead. There is some fantastic use of elemental contrast. Mixing the usual with the inane here, Eraserhead finds its passive newlywed protagonist in a world of discomfort and distrust with a worm-like baby. It truly must be viewed to be appreciated as our hero goes in and out of mundane and bizarre segments set in a grim industrial setting. Made through David Lynch's time at AFI, the film was constantly reaching for a budget, staying afloat partially due to Sissy Spacek, Lynch's wife. Lynch did most of the music and sound effects here, as he released several dark ambient albums. I've heard some of it. Some of it's good. Met with a rather microscopic debut at the time, the film developed much cult acclaim over time, though upon release some called the film, quote, unwatchable or, quote, pretentious. Hey, the film has layers, and yes, it is very strange and rather disturbing. It is not for everyone. But the allegories and symbolism intermingling with the feeling of a short story collection makes this body horror a vivid, one-of-a-kind treat to be endured. When I first saw this movie, I was alone in my room and sweating with fear, confusion, and disgust. I was practically shaking by the end. This was my first David Lynch experience, and I would never be the same. There are a lot of good picks in this decade too. Overall, I'd say the 70s probably ages the least well. The most effective films I found dealt with psychological terror, and maybe I'm biased to that kind of subgenre, but I certainly noticed in the next decade that the body horror gets another large upgrade in the 80s, and that proves to be the goriest and most graphic decades to me. Subscribe now to stay up to date with all of our new videos. Let us know your favorite horror movies from the 70s and comment below.